As you can see, that's my mom, Naomi File. People say I look like her. She developed validation back in the 1970s, and in fact, published her first paper in '73. I like to think of her as the grandmother of person-centered care, because she was talking about slipping into the shoes of the very old person back in the 1970s, when they all said she was crazy. But now, there we go. Now we have 23 training centers around the world. Unfortunately, not yet in Australia. So maybe we can talk. There are over 430 certified validation teachers around the world. Next month, I'll be going to Beijing to finish up the training for a team of over 10 Chinese certified validation teachers. And we already have a team in Japan as well. My mother was brought up in that nursing home, the Montefiore Home of the Aged, when she came as a 4-year-old refugee to the United States, and her dad was the administrator of the home. And they lived on the same floor as the old people. And I think this very unique youth gave her insight into the world of the very old person and gave her the basis of validation. What is it? Validation is a method for communicating and building relationships with very old people who have some forms of cognitive decline. It is not a magic wand. It does not make people better. It's simply a communication tool. And after all that we've heard today, I really believe more and more that this is the tool that we need to accomplish what you're doing, what Dr. Kerr is doing, what a lot of you are doing. Yes. Validation can be seen as a tripod. It is a basic attitude that we all have talked about, what you were talking about this morning. Respect, being non-judgmental, having emotive empathy. That's important for me to say because very often we use cognitive empathy, meaning I understand how you feel. But in validation, what we're doing is we set aside our emotions, our thoughts, our busy, I've got to get 12 people dressed ready for breakfast in, too short a period of time and with no help. Those things get in your way. They are your needs, perhaps, or management's needs, at any rate, but they may not be where the older adult is at in the moment. And we talked about that also today. We need to put, and trust me, I'm not going to blah blah for more than 15 minutes, and then we're going to just start moving and doing stuff, because I take it that you are all practical people. You're all working in a facility or in some way with older adults? Yes? Okay. So one of my goals for this presentation is to give you a few validation skills. And you may already know them, but maybe it'll just support the knowledge that you already have. So we have this theory as well. A lot of people used to think that validation was just about being empathetic. And, well, that's certainly a very important aspect of it. But the theory, the principles of validation, and it was crazy this morning because Dr. Kerr was talking about these things, and I'm going, oh, that's principle number 7, and I'm not going to go through all the principles with you. It gives us our understanding of aging, of what's going on with people who have cognitive decline, our own aging process, and what are the goals of validation? Why would you do it? You know, it's not to make the person better. It's not to make the person more cognitively aware, because we accept that that's just not possible. We have to take people where they are in that moment. The third leg of validation are the techniques. And they're verbal and nonverbal techniques that you can use to communicate with really anybody. And a lot of people just want to learn the techniques. But unfortunately, the techniques without the right attitude are not going to function well. And if you're using the techniques with the right attitude, but for the wrong reason, it's also not going to work very well. And that's why we say it's a triangle. Each element is dependent on the other. Oh, I am doing a few principles. Every person is unique and worthwhile. And what does that mean for our practical work? It means that we want to address people in the way that makes them feel respected and honored. So some people want to be called Vicki, their first name, whereas other days I may be in my cognitive decline, wanting a little bit more respect and status, and I want to be called Mrs. de Klerk. And that can change. It can change from morning to night. It can change from today till tomorrow. So that means every time we interact with somebody, unless we know them really, really, really well, we want to be giving them the choice of how they should be addressed. Do you see what I mean? So I would always start with Mr. or Mrs. I would say, "Good morning, Mrs. de Klerk," and allow me the honor of saying, "Oh, come on, call me Vicki." Right? And I know in our modern society today, everybody is calling each other by their first names. We've become very relaxed. But that's not how it was a very long time ago, and a lot of people still are in that time, or they just want the respect. Is that clear? Okay. That is, I think, a very easy to understand validation principle, and you probably are all saying, "Oh, well, I do that already." And I sincerely hope you do. But it can sometimes be very difficult when somebody is angry or blaming you for something, to just let them be in that space. We often jump to wanting to make them feel better, whatever that means, because we're caregivers and we want to do that, and I understand. But sometimes, and you know this from your personal experience, there are moments when you just need to be angry. There are moments when you just need to cry, or to deny, or to blame, or to express basic human emotion. And we need to leave room for that, space for that, acceptance for that. And that's a very important part of validation. Clear? When you listen with empathy, I mean truly listen, you build trust. And with trust, the other person has the opportunity to express what they need to express in that moment, which could be any of the basic human emotions, which could be universal needs. I thought about doing how validation works with I want to go home, which is a very frequently expressed wish from residents, but instead I want to do Mrs. Simon. She was one of the more challenging people I met when I was working in Amsterdam. She was a tiny woman. She carried a very large stick. And I came onto the locked unit. You know what locked units are, unfortunately. So I come onto the locked unit, morning, and there's Mrs. Simon at the end of the hallway, screaming, "Let me in!" And I went, holy tamale. And I took a breath, because I had my whole morning, just thrown right out the window. I took my breath, and I looked at Mrs. Simon. I could see her face was like this. So I made my face a little bit like that. And I saw her tension in her body, and I did not mirror her. Because sometimes if you mirror too much or without true empathy, it can feel like you're being made fun of, and we don't want that at all. So I went up to her and I said, "Mrs. Simon, what seems to be the problem here?" And she said, "They've locked me out of my room." And I said, "How dare they do that? Can I help you?" And I offered her my arm, and she grabbed my arm. And the two of us, well, there were two wings in this, and there were very long halls. And her room was there, not there, and she was confused. Can you imagine what would have happened had I said, "Oh, Mrs. Simon, your room is over there"? But instead, going with her, not making fun, not pretending, not lying, I said, "Please." And she went to the door, and she looked at me and she said, "Well, thank you." Relaxed face. And I said, "You're welcome." And then I went on and did my work. And that whole scene took maybe 2-3 minutes. And how long does a fight take? Right, and then you have an incident, and you have to write up an incident report, and then you have to go to the psychologist or the doctor and say, "Oh, that Mrs. de Klerk or Mrs. Simon is so aggressive." And then, drugs, because I don't know what to do with her. There are things you can do, and it means just going with her, not against her. And that is sort of an example of how validation can work in everyday practice, and how it takes less time to use in many cases. Any questions? So far, so good? Okay. So, sometimes there is a mistake between validation and therapeutic lying, because people think you're pretending, that's not so. So if I, Vicki de Klerk, become a disoriented, very old person in a facility, and I decide I need to go because I've got a workshop, and can you please open the door because, the train goes and I got to catch the train and then I go to Schiphol Airport and, they're waiting for me and I don't want to be late, so can you please open the door? Diversion. Oh, you know what? I just talked to the train authorities, and there's a little bit of delay. You don't have to worry about it. Let's go get a cup of coffee. And I may go with you for that moment. But I know she didn't call the train company. I know that there's no delay. But I like the contact. Okay, diversion can sometimes work short term, but it will not build trust. Let's try the same thing. Well, it's also a little bit like, let me do it again, and then we'll try lying, okay? I got to go to the train. The train is coming, and then I've got a workshop, and I've got to catch it because I don't want to hold up these people. They're waiting for me. I've got to go. Can you open the door, please? And therapeutic line might be, I don't have a key. Nice. That would be one way of lying. Another one would be, oh, it's okay. We'll get the next flight. That's sort of playing into where I am in my mind. Is that clear? Okay. And reality orientation might be, oh, Mrs. de Klerk, you're 89 years old now, and the workshops have stopped. But here you've got a wonderful family, and you've got a wonderful group of people who just love having you here. Reality orientation can be done very kindly and with great sensitivity. But it doesn't fulfill my need to be a productive, useful human being in society, which is the underlying need for that behavior. Clear? Yeah. I forgot that this thing's here. I don't have to turn around. So now it's your turn. Before I move into the exercises, I just want to summarize simply. Caregivers too often try to change the old person. Caregivers too often project themselves onto the old people. Their feelings, their thoughts of what is good and what is bad, where they are in today. Clear? Okay. By entering into the reality of the other with honesty and empathy and respect, we build bridges of communication with or without words. So, here's your first exercise. This is the most important validation technique that I have. Honest. It's simple, but it's critical because nothing happens if you're not centered. And I would say 95% of the problems we have on the work floor are because caregivers can't center themselves. And by center, I mean to put your thoughts and your feelings aside for 5 minutes. That's it, 5 minutes. To be open to another human being. So I'm going to give you my favorite centering exercise, and if it works for you, fabulous. And if it doesn't work for you, I'm very sorry. I hope all of you have some sort of practice already that you use to find that quiet place. How many of you meditate? Wonderful. You already know what I'm going to do. How many people do mindfulness? Yes, right on. How about some form of martial art? All right, awesome. All of you already know how to do this because you do it within your other practice. For those of you who don't, try this out. If it works for you, great. If not, find what does work for you. So please sit or stand as you choose with your feet firmly on the ground. You may choose to close your eyes or not as you wish. And I'd like you to think of a color that gives you the feeling of energy and strength and resourcefulness. Breathe in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And imagine that the air surrounding your head is colored with this energy-giving color. Every time you breathe in through your nose, you bring the color into your body. And every time you exhale, you paint the inside of your body with color. So fill your whole torso with color. Feel the resourcefulness. Allow the color with the next breath to move into your hips. And down into your legs. Into all your toes. With the next breath, come back to your shoulders. Fill your arms with color that gives energy and resources. Make sure you fill every finger with color. And now with one big breath, fill your head with color. And when you're ready, come back to the here and now. Was that effective for you? Cool, great. Please know This is a very visual exercise. Some of you may be auditory and need other clues, whereas others of you may be kinesthetic and you need something to touch or hold or a movement of some kind. Remember to find what works for you. This is just a little example. Okay? So the next super important skill is to observe. And I'm not just talking about big things. I'm talking about very fine expressions. So for instance, if I'm standing here like this, what do you see? Anger. That's the big thing. Now, let's get very specific. What was happening to my eyes? Specifically, can you see the muscles on the side here? Can you see that back there? Yeah, tightening. Right. Now we're getting specific. Tightening. The eyes are smaller. What happened to my mouth? Closed. Was there a tightening of the jawline? Was my jaw out or in? In. That's right, exactly, withdrawn. Sort of like preparing for the fight. And my body, what was that like? Hand on the hip. A barrier. Might be. What we want to do with our observations is to try to make them as objective as possible. Specific, small muscles, so that when I look at somebody, I can tell from this distance what's going on, a bit. And as I move forward into their space, I will be able to feel those vibrations that we heard about earlier and be more tuned into that person's world. But it can start from across the room as we train our observation skills. Like what I did with Mrs. Simon, right? First thing I did was take my breath, center. Second thing I did, observe. So simple, and yet so often overlooked. Because we've got those 10 people to get up and ready and breakfast, right? Too much rush in our day, and too little ability to just take that breath. Please know I am not blaming or criticizing in any way. I hope I'm not coming across that way. But often it's the structures we work in that create that atmosphere. And that's exactly what we need to change. That is person-centered care. Changing those structures to make room and space for everybody, caregiver and care receiver, to be able to take a breath and be where they are in that moment. This is a fabulous room for us to do this exercise, finding the appropriate distance. I'm sure you've all been to a party where somebody came up a little bit too close. I'm seeing some recognition. And your response is maybe a step backwards, maybe arms like this, maybe a little tilting of the body. right? That other person was not aware of the space that you need. And like we heard this morning, everybody gives out biochemical whatevers, and we can be aware of that. So how close is comfortable, and how close is, or what distance is too far? We have to learn to feel that. And I would like you all to pick a partner, please, and choose one person to be A and the other person to be B. Have you done that? And are there any people who need partners? Does everybody have a partner? Anybody need, oh, I've got one lady here who needs a partner. Who else? Oh, right there in the back. Matchmaker, matchmaker, make. Here's somebody who needs a partner. Who need, oh, there's a lady right back there in the plaid. There you go. There we go. All right, so quick choose who is A. And I think actually in this exercise, it's better to stand up if you don't mind. And A, you are going to put your hands like this. You're going to face each other, and A, put your hands like this. And then B, where are my B's? B, good, excellent. B is going to put their hands like this. And you are going to close your eyes. And A is going to come up, and B is going to come down. And when you feel something, stop. Try not to touch. It's not disastrous if you touch, but try not to. Anybody feel cold? Yes. I have to tell you, there is no way for you to do this exercise wrong. You cannot do it wrong because it's your experience, and that's what's important. You're becoming more aware of energy. What were some other experiences? Solid. How cool is that? What? Tingle. Something like electricity. Warm, wonderful. You're feeling that energy field, what we heard about this morning. Now, how do you transfer this into practical stuff? You can't go around the nursing home like that. That would be silly. Let's do a different exercise. I want A to stand in one place. And B, I'd like you to get a little bit of distance from A. A, I would like you to start telling B, your partner, I woke up this morning and I had to get up early because I had to get to this conference. Just what happened this morning. Hopefully a neutral story. B, give yourself a lot more space, a lot more space, lot more space. Use the room. We've got an entire huge room. And as A is telling their story, B, you approach them slowly, slowly, not with your hands up, but just feel what's close for the other person. Observe, observe, observe. If you see the other person do that, that's a sign you're too close. If the person does not make eye contact, it means you could be too far away. Am I clear? Give it a shot, see what happens. Were you able to find the right distance? Were you able to find the right distance? Yes. Did you test it by going a little too close? And you got that, right. And what happened? What were some of the things that told you that you were too close? There's the moving away. Eye contact was lost, right? Somebody looks away. The eyes got bigger. Wonderful observation. Turning away a bit, just sometimes that just giving you a quick exit, right? Yeah. Did anybody notice the breathing? Sometimes it stopped. Yes, that can happen. Somebody goes, could you see that? Did you see that? Somebody goes, a quick inhalation, and they hold it tight up here. Okay? So keep an eye out for breathing. The breathing of the other person gives you enormous amounts of information. Okay? Yes, ma'am. The person who was approaching didn't get close enough, is what you're saying? Okay, so then what you need to do is to take a breath, go back to the centering, put aside your need for distance, and move to the other person's boundaries. Is that clear? I've been in both situations where I needed more space, but the other person needed me right here. Now, my eyes don't focus there, so I had to put aside my need to see, literally, and go to her need for nearness. And that's a choice, and you can choose to do it or not. But I want you to be very aware every time that I am now choosing to move to the other person's space. I'm putting aside mine. Or, you know, I didn't get enough sleep, and I don't have it today. So today I can't do it. Because we are human beings, and we can't be validating 24/7. You just cannot. We cannot have empathy 24/7. We can have empathy for between 3 and maximally 10 minutes. And that's as long as a validation session can last. Okay? So have respect for your own boundaries, but also be willing to put aside your boundaries so that you can connect with that other human being at their boundary. And that's what this is all about. You ain't done yet. But this one, I think you all know, respectful eye contact is incredibly important. And what I mean by that is not staring somebody down, and not avoiding eye contact, and not looking, oh, I'm sorry, you can sit down. But wait, we're not done with the partner exercise, so if you cross tables, stay with your partner. When you talk to somebody from this position, standing to sitting, that creates a hierarchical relationship. And when you want to enter into somebody else's reality, you can't do that in a hierarchy. Adult to adult. So in the next exercise, let's give B a chance to tell a little story. And B is going to sit there and tell a story that maybe what was the most difficult thing for you that you feel like talking about in the past week. And first A, I want, if this is B, first listen like this, with no eye contact. Then, after 30 seconds, make eye contact from the front, but still standing. And after about 30 seconds, I'd like you to sit or kneel until you are on eye level. So that's 3 positions. No eye contact standing, eye contact standing, eye contact on eye level. Clear? So give it a shot and see what happens. You had a lot to talk about, I hear. How did that work for you? I'm particularly interested in hearing from B, the person telling the story. Yes, please. You couldn't concentrate when she wasn't looking at you. That is so interesting, yes? Again, this is not an exercise you can do wrong. There is no wrong answer here. It is only your answer. Yes, ma'am?
Yeah, I found it harder to hear her when I was standing and not looking.
How cool is that? She couldn't hear as well.
And I found it disengaging, like she had a lack of interest in what I had to say.
Could you all hear? B was telling the story and found when A was not looking, she was disengaged. Did I say that right? Cool. All right, so you all know to make eye contact, right? You learned that so many times. But I guess with this exercise, I want you to feel how important it is. Because so often in our day, we're coming in and go, "Good morning, Mrs. de Klerk. I'll just open the window here a little bit, get a little fresh air." And we're into our thing. Before we take that, and how long does it take? 2 seconds, maybe, to say, "Good morning, Mrs. de Klerk. I'm just going to open up the curtains for you." I mean, that doesn't take long. What does it take? A breath. Right. Just a breath. And to focus outside of our thoughts. I have to do this, I have to do that. All true, all stressy. And now I'm going into Mrs. de Klerk's room. Be in the moment. Be there now. All those trite phrases have real meaning. So the very last critical technique is be aware of your voice tone and how you use your voice. Because in that, which message, you all know that communication or verbal communication is, what is it? 1/3 contents and 70% packaging? What do you believe? The body language or the words? The body language, right. So if I'm all uptight with whatever's going on in my life, and I walk in and say, "Good morning, Mrs. de Klerk, how are you today?" Right? That's a different message than, "Good morning, Mrs. de Klerk, how are you today?" Voice tone. You may all use perfectly adult to adult, respectful voice tones. And I'm giving you a homework assignment. I would like you to get your phones, not right now, and the next time you have an interaction with somebody, a client you work with, I would like you to audio tape 2 minutes and just take it home with you and get a drink and then listen to it. And maybe what you hear is exactly what you want, which is that adult to adult, respectful voice tone. And if you do not, then you have become aware. And that is awesome, because then you can make choices. Then you can choose to say, I want to put energy into that, or, you know, not right now. But being aware is the first step. Okay? I know these exercises seem simple or maybe silly, but I have to tell you, they truly are the prerequisites to communication. At least communication on a respectful, empathetic level. Ask, don't tell. Those are some of the most important validation techniques that we use. And this is where you can get more information. We just redid our website. We're very proud of it. I hope it becomes a good resource for you, because we have our own YouTube channel where you can find exercises on centering with color, centering with touch. Free. Use them. Spread them around. You know, they're resources. How to make eye contact. Simple things that we did here today. That's how important these things are. Okay? Yes?
Can you tell us how you would deal with a lady who wants to go to the conference?
How do you deal with the lady who wants to go to the conference? I would say, Mrs. de Klerk, have you done a lot of conferences in your life? And Mrs. de Klerk might say, I did hundreds. Wow. How many, what was the biggest conference you ever gave? And so what I'm doing is asking. I'm exploring her world. I'm not worrying about the train, because it's not about the train. It's about Mrs. de Klerk's need to feel useful and respected.
So you're still distracting, but you're doing it with clear.
I'm not misdirecting. I'm going straight to the heart.
You're still distracting from her problem. You're just
You're not hearing me. The problem is not the train. That's not, I'm going actually honing. If I said, oh, what time does the train leave, and asked all sorts of questions about the train, Mrs. de Klerk would get more and more upset, because it's not about the train. It's about my need to do the workshop. And what did you do workshops about? Well, validation. Tell me about that. And then I'm doing it. Then I don't need the train, because I got you. I'm giving my workshop to somebody who's listening. Does that make sense? In other words, you have to go to what's under the behavior. And very often, it will be a basic human need, like the need for respect, the need to be useful, the need to give love. If you see somebody with a sheet or a napkin or something holding it, or even a hand, because people will use what they have. including their own body. Now, I may not know what that is in her mind's eye, but I know that she loves it. So I could say, oh, you love that. Do you understand? We're always going for what's under. That's the validation way. Oh.
In the situation you were going to use where you said if someone wanted to go home, and as you said, that's quite a common one we see. So that could be one where there could be different underlying reasons.
Right.
And so...
what do you have to do there?
That's my question, and so I can...
No, that's the question I would ask.
Oh, okay.
The lady goes, I have to go home now. And I would go, oh, what do you have to do?
Okay, so that's how you get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
She might say, the kids are coming home from school. Or she might go, I don't have time for you. You know, that's also possible. And then it's like, okay, try again tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Validation is not a magic wand. It does not work in 100% of the situations. But it is a way of being and approaching people, and it is extremely effective in a lot of situations. Was I clear? Okay. I'm being a little quick because I got the 5-minute mark. Here's my email address. Please do feel free to email me directly. And what else do I have there? Oh, one thing I do want to say, validation training takes a very long time for the reasons I hope I've gotten across. What you've heard here is tippy tip of the iceberg. And level 1 certification lasts usually 9 months because we require 26 weeks of practice, which you document. We then have a second level of certification, which is group practitioner, where you validate 4 to 8 disoriented people. And that is another 9-month training. And after that, we've got presenter training certification and then teacher certification. So to become a validation teacher, you have to be working with validation intensively for a minimum of 3 years. And to get master certification, that's an additional 5 years of teaching. We have 17 masters in the world, and these are our resources for developing the validation method in the future. In fact, right now, one of our discussion points is, should we really be using these labels for each of the 4 phases? So we're taking Naomi Feil's theory, honoring that work, and looking at it with fresh eyes and new research and experiences from all over the world. I wanted to tell you about the training because it's critically important for you to know the seriousness of, or the pedagogic integrity of what we're doing. It takes a lot to get certified in validation. It's not a quick workshop. It's not online learning or only online. We do have blended courses, and I am hoping to bring a blended validation certification course to Australia. That would be awesome. Partially with videos, partially with interactive webinars, and of course, the in-person sessions where we do exercises, like we did here today, because that brings it into your body, and that's where validation lives, in your hands and in your gut, not in your head. So thank you very much for your attention.